ready? Or
Yep.
do you want to do the intro?
Oh, I don't know if I can handle that kind of responsibility.
That's great. Hello. Welcome again to Studios 2, number 3. As always, we are here with Jen and Matt to talk to you today about another fun subject. Would you like to tell us what we're here today for?
Well, I thought we could talk about making the transition from traditional medium to digital medium. That was a journey that I went through. I believe it was a journey that you went through.
Yes.
And I imagine there are a lot of other people who are either thinking about making that journey, are in the middle of that journey, or have completed that journey, but I think it's worth talking about.
Definitely. Do you want to start on a personal story of kind of either how or maybe and then into why you did that?
Sure. This is going to betray how old I am. I first became interested in drawing. Drawing, I guess I was always interested in. My grandfather worked at a paper factory, so that was like one thing we always had, like a massive abundance to, was just never-ending paper. So it was a way that I would entertain myself growing up, and I just had a real love for it. I liked the Sunday morning newspaper comics, and so I started out kind of drawing those little comic strips, and then I got introduced to manga around I was around maybe 12, and that's when I became interested in drawing longer stories. And I think I submitted my first like graphic novel that was like around 60 pages long. It was all just like drawn in pencil to like young authors when I was like in 7th grade.
Okay.
So I think I wanted to become a comic artist when I was around, maybe around like 12, 13 years old. And back then, the only like route that I knew to becoming a comic book artist was to, make a submission to a publisher like Marvel or DC, and they weren't picking up manga at this time.
Okay.
It was still very, very, very niche. The whole Tokyo Pop explosion hadn't happened in the industry yet. So there wasn't really any examples that I could find of this happening, but I still, wanted to draw comics, so I was just drawing these hundreds of pages of really bad comics, kind of in my own little bubble, because back then people were still on dial-up, and, I didn't have any software other than MS Paint, and I didn't really know about any online art communities or anything. Like, I think I might have had a GeoCities site that I was, posting some of my artwork on, but there wasn't, like, a feedback loop or anything going on. It was kind of more just, like, a project that I put together for, like, school or something, just a place to, like, dump the pictures, but I don't think anybody was looking at them. And I guess fast forward to, like, college, I started learning a little bit more about, like, how comics are created. So instead of drawing them on, like, computer paper, I started to draw them on, like, Bristol paper that was, like, the proper, proportions for getting printed. And I was using cutout screen tones, which were, like, these dot patterns for creating, like, gray in your different shades of gray, because everything was, like, still made for, like, print. Like, it wasn't even, like, digital printing. It was still, like, the old print presses.
Real deal, yeah.
Yeah, the old deal. And at some point in my, when I graduated from college, I was trying to get some of my work actually published by kind of a small indie publisher. And they were like, we can't print this, screen. We can't use this screen tone printing. It's all moirade and terrible, because everything's gone digital. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I can't do this like the old school way anymore. I better like teach myself Photoshop and, do my grays from there. And then, people started posting more comics online. I started like seeing what was going on in like different art communities online. everything was starting to go towards color. So I was like, well, I guess I should probably learn how to do at least some simple, like kind of cell style coloring in Photoshop. And fast forward, I guess, now to where I am now. I don't do anything traditionally anymore. Like I for a while, I was like, oh, I can't get used to the tablets. So I would still ink traditionally, ink like on a piece of paper, and then I would scan that in, and then I would clean up the line work, and then I would color it. Just because like the tablet technology just wouldn't pick up like that same nuance that I had in my lines when I was inking traditionally. Now I do everything digitally, and it's really sped up my workflow, and I've learned to enjoy it just as much as painting and sketching and drawing on a piece of paper. There's a certain like visceral feel that you get from working on paper, and now they have like screen protectors that emulate that kind of like slight toothiness that like paper has. So this is where I'm gonna like sound like kind of like an art nerd or something, but like Bristol has like a very smooth kind of surface to it, as opposed to like a sketchbook has that like very kind of grainy, more textured feel to it. And these are all things that like you become very sensitive to when you've been working with these papers a lot. So yeah, like going from that to like something that's completely smooth like glass, when you're working with like tablets or even like drawing monitors, I think in some way are even harder for me to get used to than the tablets, because there's like a little bit of parallax between like where your pen is touching the surface of the glass and where it's kind of like appearing on the screen underneath. iPad Pro, Apple Pencil Pro. I'm not a huge Apple fangirl, but I gotta say,
She is not.
putting it mildly, but I gotta say, there's that's the only thing that allowed me to fully transition to a completely digital workflow, and I've never looked back because it's just cleaner. There's an investment up front, but like once you're done with that initial investment, you're kind of good to go. Like I did a lot of marker work when I was doing the convention scene, and I invested thousands of dollars into like replacing these markers, as opposed to like just having to buy this one tablet, then not having to worry about like having to keep replenishing all the colors and stuff.
So in making the transition to digital, I have a kind of an odd question then. Do you think that if you are a modern artist or you are someone, you can choose to go traditional, but that's almost the niche? Like you should maybe even focus on getting a digital footing, because that's always going to be the now and the new, and then you can be more subtle. I keep thinking of people who may start a business where I'll draw your whatever, or like I'll paint something for you, but in the now, to be more of a professional, like we'll call that working artist, you almost need to have the digital skills. Even if you've worked on, like we say, the fundamentals, you have to have them in a digital mindset, or where, if you want to think of a word for me here, you have to have those skills. Does that make sense? Like it's kind of true, almost backwards in a way, where you're gonna have to have that digital eventually.
So that's a really good question. Like with my particular journey, the thing that got me to move digitally was the distribution. So as soon as I wanted to take my drawings out of my sketchbooks and actually get them published or post them online, or whatever format that whatever professional format to present it to other people, has all gone digital. So if you work traditionally now, you're probably going to have to find a way to turn that piece of paper, that painting, into, a JPEG or a TIFF or, a PDF or whatever format, that's going to be required for it to be consumed, in a digital virtual way. Unless you happen to be a fine artist who's very, I don't want to say lucky, but If you happen to be a fine artist that's like working with just like gallery kind of stuff, that's not my experience. I'm not a gallery fine artist, so I can't speak to that. But in my experience, it is definitely a necessity because you want to put your best foot forward. And so something that's created traditionally and then translated into a digital format is honestly not going to look as clean and as at least for doing comics and stuff. It's just it doesn't look as clean and polished as it could look if it was just digital to begin with. Or you have to put so much work into cleaning it up to get it to look like that. That's going to hinder your workflow.
You might as well have already been in a digital format from the get-go. It's a weird analogy, but when they're doing all these HD remasters of older movies, my example is The Wizard of Oz. They did it on Blu-ray, but big fans were talking like you can see the cracks as they show, where the majesty of the giant matte paintings and all those things were like they showed through the cracks. Technically, doesn't make the movie bad or it worse. It's just that that medium was probably meant to be consumed on a video format that was analog. So actual film translates different than the digital. I know it's kind of weird, but that's exactly what I thought of. Is yes, you may have painted this or drawn this, and when you scan it, maybe this like smudge marks or something that are a part of it just don't translate. It's a very interesting point. And you were kind of talking about I guess we could just maybe address some barriers to going digital, if you want to. And, like you said, it's an investment. But from what I'm discerning, and actually what I know from my own experiences, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And should people not be scared to make the jump? Is that a good...
I think that it's very overwhelming right now to be like a aspiring artist. Like I think of myself as being a child, and like it was very simple back then. Like I want to draw comics. I'm just gonna take out a piece of paper and a pencil, and I'm gonna draw it, and then I'm gonna mail this off to like Marvel and get published. I mean, that in my head. That's how the process worked. And now it's like there's this whole cesspool of ideas and advice and different artists online. So number one, you can't be in your own little bubble where you're like the best artist in your school and you can pat yourself on the back anymore, because you can look around online and be like, wow,
be humbled.
I'm
very
totally
quickly.
crap compared to like all these other people who have been doing this longer than me, or who are just picked up on it way faster. You still have to have the fundamentals as far as like having the fundamental drawing and skills and color theory and all those kinds of things. But now you need to know the software, and you need to understand like the different, how you're going to export it. So learning the software is going to be another hurdle to learn, as well as like the fundamental skills underneath that technical prowess, I guess. And then you're also going to have to know, how you want to pursue getting it distributed, like what kind of rights you want to retain. There's a lot of places where you're going to get taken advantage of as a young artist who doesn't understand the worth of their own artwork. So it's very difficult to like navigate all these ideas, to become an artist, where back in the olden days, it was just, I just got to work on having good art, and then a patron will descend and make everything happen for me.
Yes.
Yes,
they're like a royal. You're a royal subject. I understand. It's a technology is just expands upon itself exponentially. It just keeps going. Personal example for me. I guess if that's cool to talk about, for making the transition to digital, where I was playing music, then I got into a band and was playing music, and someone had gifted me some horrible recording software, a physical disc, and a key code, and it was garbage, but it was amazing. So we had these horrible demos recorded on any computer we could find that our parents would let us use, so they're all castaways. And then moving on, I guess my true jump to digital as a musician was I went to college and had an excuse to buy a very expensive laptop, for which I said, oh, I need a Mac. And that was actually a good choice in the end because of it coming with the software, or more creative software than I think any base computer would come with. Um, and essentially what happened was the specs were there and the hardware was just coming out. Like, it was one of those perfect things where I'm in the same age range as you. Is, YouTube was for like bootleg stuff, and there was only like 5 original videos when I first saw it. It was like, oh, they got episodes of shows on here. So it was this weird thing where I almost didn't view it as a place I could use to get my message or my creations out there. So thank goodness I said, oh, I need a really, really good laptop, and saved up and got it. And like I said, the funny part for our tech people out there is had a 100 gig hard drive and 512 gigabytes of RAM. So that was a heck of a Mac right there. That was a specced out monster. And the hard drive was an upgrade. It was $100 upgrade to get it to 100 gigabytes. And this was a MacBook Pro from 06. I mean, this is like $2,000 computer. But anyway, so that was a giant barrier to jump to be digital, basically. But you now read stories. I don't want to go too far on a tangent of people recording entire albums on iPads, iPhones, even. The power is just there. So the jump to digital, as expensive as it was and can be, still can even out in the end, because, like you were saying, supplies for art can be as simple as a pencil and a piece of paper, all the way to expensive, like artistic, like markers and things, where $10 a piece is a laughable. It could go up from there. And personally, in music, Audacity is the free program we have here, one of them, and you can get that at home and record. You can do multi-track on that like it's nobody's business. So that's a very low barrier. And then another example for just digital, in terms of music and actually creating it with tools, is you used to have to go physically buy effects pedals for guitars or microphones even, and now you can take this microphone and run it through simulators. You can have simulated speakers, simulated amps, simulated even guitars. They make a few different lines of guitars that have digital pickups that will make them sound like other guitars or completely other instruments. So yeah, making the jump is cheaper than before, for sure. But it also just opens up a world, a creative palette in terms of new things that you would have to invest in as well. So I think people are a little nervous to make the jump, but ironically, it makes your access greater for cheaper. So
I have a question for you
yes.
along those lines. In my mind, like being a musician and being like a composer and then like being a producer are all like 3 different skill sets. But would you say to be a modern day musician, you have to have like your fingers dipped in all those things, or can you just focus on one thing?
I think you can. I know this isn't really an answer. You can do both, but to get yourself out there, like you said, distribution and everything, it's almost you have to, but also a blessing that you can. So you can sit and program drums now, and you can program, what would you say, like synth sounds, instead of having this huge outboard gear. If you look at synthesizers in the 70s and before, and having an orchestra in your band, basically, you would have to go to a studio and do that. I think you don't have to, but if you want to be that's the other thing, professional or working musician, you do have to have all those skills, if not just enough to like sell your product or demo your product or what you want to get back from someone you pay to do those things, or a collaborator. And it will not hurt to have all those skills. It's just, I think we've personally talked about it. You want to do the art, and I definitely like performing music. The hard part is when I get with people and try to schedule practice, basically, is what I'm saying. You're dealing with other people and other people's schedules. I can program these drums and all these amazing things. So if I put in the time to learn those things, I actually expand my musicality. And then playing those different instruments and knowing them helps expand my musicianship as well. So at least on my side of the fence, those skills will build on them. I'm sure they do in your area too. All skills of editing and file formats and even the boring stuff and exporting all builds on itself. But most definitely, if I'm answering your question right, you kind of have to wear all the hats in some way. How much is up to you? And it probably will determine your path if you want to become professional and turn this into something you do that's more than a hobby. And I guess even at my hobbyist level, I am still programming things, writing things, recording things, and then still physically playing a real instrument alongside all those digital things that I can do now. So yeah, does that answer a little bit?
I keep coming back to the idea that it must be distribution. So maybe you don't necessarily, you don't want to necessarily become like a professional, like do it full time. But if you want people to even hear your music, or in my case, if I want somebody to actually see my artwork, it kind of becomes a necessity to learn some software in the process.
Yes.
Unless you're infinitely wealthy and you can just hire other people to
And
do
you can
stuff
hire
for
that's
you.
and I think that maybe if we address it, that was the purpose of the record companies, at least, and whatever art dealers or distribute, however, like the big Marvel, they would handle all of that for you in a way once you signed on or signed your life away. So it is a beautiful thing that we can take that power as artists and pump things out there.
There's no longer the gatekeeping that there was before, so I can draw whatever story or style that I want without having to worry about like Marvel or whatever other large publishing company like accepting whatever it is I want to do for my vision.
Yeah, and you can test visions out to see if there is a market for something larger. I think that's, there's a lot of pros here when it comes to making this jump and using digital formats to get your message out there. It is sort of frustrating because you are having to spend that time being your own producer slash marketer and all those things too. And I think we'll throw some links to our lynda.com courses that the library offers on marketing and maybe anything really that has to do with making this digital jump. Haven't looked through all those to see if there are things. But since there is not gatekeeping, which is beautiful for art, we also sail our boat into the, as you said, cesspool and the overflooded market. I don't know how grumpy we want to get, but it is sort of a new world where everyone can post from their phone instantly live without a thought and upload it.
So how does one actually gain any traction in this like enormous pool of ideas and artistry? Like how does one get that click? Get that like?
They're definitely more official and advised and monetarily sound or formulaically based, scientific ways to do it. I think a big one, at least from a musician's standpoint, it's kind of old school, which I think we are, is being in the community you want to be a part of, which may sound dumb, but it's seeing other bands, supporting other bands, listening to other bands. It's kind of the love you give is the love you get. Just going, hey, listen to my stuff all the livelong day. It could work. It could be good and it could work. But I think a large part of it is just going out, being in the community, and gaining that. I don't know if trust is the right word, but reputation maybe.
Your largest audience might be other creators who are in the same place as you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and catching the eye of someone who's in a position to help you, or maybe even just work with you. I think that's the other thing is being seen. In it, even if it just adds to your tool belt. So I think, hey, I went out and played my song, and you meet a bass player. You meet someone who might be able to collaborate with you. Yeah, and I think that's a big thing with marketing now is the word of mouth is bigger than the promos that you do.
Mm.
You could brute force your fame with millions of dollars, I guess, but people are going to spread your, or like I said, spread your message, spread your word, your art, your creations, because they are a fan. I'm very guilty of that. When I get into something, everybody's got to know about it. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
um, I would just, to me, it just seems very overwhelming. Like, I am an introvert. I like spending absurd amount of hours by myself creating these projects because of I get to be by myself and just in my own headspace. So I personally could see how things like having to market and having to network could be very unappealing to um, to other introverts or especially or other artists such as myself who would have that same mindset. So for me, it is like a constant struggle to like. That's why I decided I didn't want to do art professionally anymore, is because I wasn't interested in doing that kind of like self marketing. And my work was too kind of like niche to like pursue like a large publisher and stuff. Um, I would say that if you feel like you've got some really professional quality work that would appeal to like a large audience, though, is there are agents out there who will help you manage that aspect of your career. So don't discount that. Agents are kind of almost like um, submitting to publishers, though. It benefits you to actually like do a little research on the agent that you're kind of soliciting, see if they're the types of things that they manage would like kind of align with your own sensibilities, your own aesthetic, and then you submit to them kind of the way that you would submit to a publisher, and then they can advocate for you so that if you don't have a good business sense as to what kind of rates or what kind of deals that you should be making with a publisher, if you want to go that route, yeah, I would just highly recommend pursuing getting an agent. It'll be worth it in the long run because you don't want to devalue your work if you're going to be pursuing it on a professional level.
Understandable. Is there anything else we want to talk about today?
I would just close. I like to close on an upbeat note.
Yes, we'll do
I want to inspire. I always feel really fired up to get working on creative things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I shouldn't say always because I did have like a slump for like 5 years.
These
days, I'm always like super pumped about it. And I would just say that like, don't get overwhelmed with knowing everything. I got to the place I am right now through many, many years of work, and I'm sure I wasted a lot of time where I could have been, I don't know, progressing forward a little bit faster. But I think it's important to kind of like just keep going at it, let things kind of develop organically. If you don't want to like look into like, I don't know, copyrights or like agents or networking or whatever, then, just focus on what it is that you're trying to do and just do it. Because at the end of the day, like flubbing around, looking at a bunch of forums and trying to like get addicted to like a feedback loop is not gonna get your whatever your story is or your music like made. You don't want it to distract from like what it is you're trying to accomplish.
My closing thought then, kind of jumping off yours, which I just thought of too, is maybe it just not even forgetting why you started it. The whole goal was to make art of whatever, to do a project. That was the whole goal to begin with. It can get very distracting out there, performing, writing, and negotiating, things like that too. So my other closing thing is really just right up there with you. The barriers are so low now, especially knowing that Studio 304 exists. um, and the cost to play, I guess, is so low when it comes to promotion, distribution of your songs and music to the major streaming services. So if you aren't going to battle and not having an agent and trying to sell it, if you do want your art to be heard, seen, consumed, um, it's never been a better time, really. And I think really being a part of the community that you're trying to sell to um, will just pay off exponentially, and not necessarily need to think about it like that as a payoff, but you will just make connections and meet people, which will just be of so much more value to you in your creative journey. So don't forget that. That's the advice we're given today. We command you to create. So yes, thank you for your kind words and sharing your story. I had fun today, and I guess that's it. So, from us to you, have a splendid day. We are Studio Stu at Studio 304 at the library. Have a wonderful week.